If we wanted to solve this equation more accurately using algebra, we could either use factoring, which is very rarely going to work out, or we can use the quadratic formula. So this is one of the topics that I assume that you've seen before, and you may have to review on your own using something like Forgotten Algebra by Barbara Lee. But the basic idea is this. If you have a quadratic equation in standard form, which means you must have one side or the other equal to 0. So if you have something like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then the two solutions that you'll get from that equation come from this formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus this square root, all of that divided by 2 times a, where a, b, and c are the numbers or the coefficients in front of the x squared, x, and the constant terms. Now notice the plus or minus symbol is what gives you two solutions here. So to get the two solutions, you need to compute negative b plus the root divided by 2a, and then separately negative b minus the root, all divided by 2a. So common errors include not separating those two things out into two different computations, and the other common error is not dividing the entire numerator up on top, all of that, by 2a. Let's take a look at what this would look like for this particular example so you can see how this is used. Recall that our problem was to try to find when the total revenue is $4,000. And what we had done was taken 4,000, set it equal to revenue, set that into the equation, and then the next step was to set that equation equal to 0 to put it into standard form. So once one side of the equation is equal to 0, then you can identify what your values of a, b, and c are. A always includes the sign, so we have to include the negative 3 here. B also includes the sign, so there's an implied positive here, b is 250, and c, along with the others, includes the sign, so it's negative 400. So I take those values of a, b, and c and put them into the quadratic formula, getting something like this. Now, we're not going to go through all of these calculations one step at a time because this is something I assume you've seen before, but I would suggest that perhaps you pause the video at this point, do these calculations, and make sure you can get these two values. Make sure you can use your calculator correctly, and if you can't, you'll need to perhaps get some help or ask some questions on the forums or do something to make sure you can do these calculations, because there will be plenty of them to do in the upcoming homework assignment. So this is how you'd use the quadratic formula to solve an equation like this. So in this example, we saw there were two different values that made this equation true. And just as a reminder, when we think about why that makes sense, go back and think about that picture that we drew. There are two different points on the graph where the revenue is equal to 4,000. And each one of those corresponds to a different combination of quantity and demand and price that you would charge at that quantity. So there are two different values, two different points on the curve that do this for you, and that's why we're getting two solutions to that equation.